So do we have any questions from the floor? Okay, great.
Yeah, hi. I'm at DPIRD, and just wondering, we have a lot of historical data sets from farm trials and landscape mapping and all this type of information. Some of it has coordinates, some goes way back to the 60s and things like that. Just wondering about going forward, can we share this information with everyone else in the industry? Are there going to be issues with privacy, consumers and old data set? Just wondering your thoughts on that aspect, because we've been talking more about going forward today. Just wondering about historical stuff.
Can I start with it? Malcolm Turnbull a couple of years ago kind of made a very bold statement that Australian government organisations and Australian federal government has adopted an open access policy around all data, and that applies to all government enterprises and government departments. So what's really interesting is how that's playing out across Australia. Most data that's being kept, and this is an issue with legacy data, how it's kept and whether it's kept with personal information combined with the agricultural data as well, because that's an issue. Remember that with personal information, you have to be very careful because there are all the privacy legislative requirements around that. But essentially, in line with agricultural research across the world, we've seen the adoption of open access policies, and the Australian government has a series of open access mandates around government information, government data, and be surprised if the Western Australian government is any different, that government information should be made publicly available. So data sets that are kept, but it's how that is managed in relation to how you protect personal information that may be attached to that.
Thanks.
Yeah, would you want to answer that?
Add a bit more to that.
Yeah.
So we're in the process of moving some of those data sets. We said we're not going to move all data into the public domain, mindful of the privacy issues and confidentiality. But the soils data, one of the hard bit in it is actually getting it, so all the data is entered in a standard way, so that it all lines up, and then you can move it across the models, which is what the eConnected project started doing. With the weather data and the soils data, and then it'll use all of the information that sits behind those decision support tools that I put up earlier on. All of that will be made available, and then the next lot of data to come off the back of that and set them up to the same standards going forward, so that they can all talk to each other and interrelate and make that available in privacy.
Okay, another question?
So it's really a follow-on question to Leanne. Given the work you've done and that separation between what's personal and what the aggregated sets, are you in a position to actually issue guidelines to ICT leadership as to how best to do the separation that Pete talked about, so that more data can be made available, but it complies from the legal perspective, because ignorance is not considered to be a defence. So therefore, if the research has been done, it needs to be published to the ICT leadership to be able to then start reviewing the data sets it has and what methods are appropriate for that splitting and usefulness bringing it to the fore.
I think you've hit on, there's a very big, opportunity here for capacity building around IT industry, getting that conversation going around what the difference is between personal information and non-personal information within organisations. So the value, what's been the trend is that most data is de-identified, and so once it's aggregated, it's held in a de-identified form in many organisations. Some organisations, for example, need to keep the individual's information attached to that data for a whole range of reasons. So it's certainly not going to be an easy process. No, the short answer is no, I can't give the IT industry guidelines about that. But as each organisation goes forward, that is something that will need to be worked through, and certainly, you know, there's opportunities there for guidelines. And it comes back to this issue of how is your data being stored and managed, and how is it going to be managed into the future? Because given in mind, given the fact that the Productivity Commission at some point may require data aggregators and holders to have the ability to return that data to individuals is actually throwing a huge spanner in the works, because most of the data is being aggregated in a de-identified form, and that provides the security and the trust that people can't trace it back to whoever that particular person is. So it'll be an ongoing process. It's not impossible, but it's something each individual organisation will have to deal with in its own way, I suspect.
Chris would like to.
So in the case of the soils data, each one's got a GPS coordinates associated with it. Now, we're not going to put the GPS coordinates in the public domain, otherwise you can identify exactly where the sample was taken from. But and under the soil classification system we've got, we'll group them and put them under that, so you can look on the map, see the group of soil samples, where they come off that map, and link them up that way, and then that can go in the public domain, but we can't put it with the GPS coordinates.
Yeah, just following on that, I know it's something we've thought a fair bit about, and some of the conversation we'll be having with Leanne in the future is around this. So obviously, any time you've got spatial information that in agriculture identifies with half a brain who actually owns that country. So it's very hard to actually do de-identification in agriculture when you're doing the spatial. So that's just one thing in mind. The other thing that we're very aware of is we often conduct research for the universities, for the departments, for private sector, and we're often relying on farmer partners to help us with that. And the thing we haven't landed on, and I'm sure each of you are well ahead of us here, that each of you would make sure that you have an agreement with the farmer, that you're in the space, the farmer owns all that information, and you're actually, I suppose, asking for custodianship of that information. All the information you collect, you'd give back to them, that have all those data sets available at all times in their ownership, because you'd all be following that. That's where we'd like to get to. That's aspirational, but I'm sure each of you are ahead of that and thought of that, because that's obviously, if we collect the information off the land, if someone wants to buy a paddock going forward, if this information has been collected, that's going to be of value, isn't it? That's what we've been stating, so we'll be all working towards that.
Yes.
Just from a very generalised farmer's perspective, we've had this discussion with our grower members, and they've raised a few concerns that it really is around the trust, but also around what they might perceive as a devaluation of their industry. So all this data on an individual basis might be really valuable and can provide value to their business and improve productivity or efficiencies. But on a global scale, is that going to threaten our competitiveness with, say, the likes of China or Europe or America or South America, looking at the value of our land, looking at our production, our input costs, going, Barley's not going to go there. So what does that then mean on a competitive level in our markets, being able to export our grain, because we're already seeing issues with trying to get our grain into other markets while others are cutting their costs and slipping in the back door. So it's a question for Leanne and Brad and Chris.
I was going to say, so
It's a bit of a law, economics.
yeah, so that was one of the key reasons got into this space was, in the end, Australian agriculture, we have to remain competitive. At the moment, we can sell into Tokyo, we can sell into Melbourne, and we generally get a premium because there's a lot of middle class consumers there. At the moment, we get a premium because we've conned them that we've got clean and green agriculture. So they're buying on a promise, and more consumers, and the market is saying, show me the evidence, not show me the money, show me the evidence. And I know in the grains industry in Victoria, and I know it's the same in WA, if any time that the grower was asked to come up with evidence to show that there was some substance behind that clean and green, we'd be 5 years away from getting close to being able to come up with anything. At the moment, I personally think the farmer's signature is worth nothing. When the farmer delivers to the silo, or the truck driver, or someone else, they'll sign anything to get their load off the back of the truck. because they've got to go back and get another one. So therefore the signature saying it's all safe, there's no actual records that are really attached with that, there's no real thought about what that signature means, so it's become a worthless piece. The whole digital piece, if we get this right, not only will we be able to substantiate our clean and green agriculture, which means we'll remain competitive, we'll actually have, I suppose, knowledge to export and play a leading role in, I suppose, this traceability around supply chain, which in the end is going to be foundational for, I think, Australian agriculture, the grains industry.
I think this is something that the rural development corporations are very much grappling with. It's the industry's competitiveness. So I think it's interesting that to look at it from a whole range of different perspectives, from the individual growers to grower groups, to the industry as a whole, and to the national kind of level. What I think is, what we've seen in other jurisdictions is there's an approach of, if I can put it simply, a traffic light system of there's releasing of some data in the public sphere that will benefit everyone, those people who do and don't contribute data to that. But as the kind of information gets more aggregated and more value added for the industry's competitiveness, that there's more securitisation, so it goes like from a green to an orange to a red, essentially. So there's some information that certain agricultural industries do not want released to retailers, to Coles and Woolies, or do not want released to competitors. So, and that's accepted and that's fair, I think, in a competitive market. So that is that question of how much information is available. But internationally, I think it's really important to note that the really big public good funders of agricultural research, so the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and CGIAR system, have all mandates that any publicly funded agricultural research must be fully, openly and freely available to everyone and anyone for any purposes. So that's happening at one level, yet industry, national interests are bumping up against that as well.
Yeah, so those policies and legal frameworks that are going to be developed will protect what information gets released and what doesn't.
Exactly, and part of the recommendations, as our report is part of the recommendations that we're making to government as part of the P2D project, is that we really need to have those whole of agricultural industry, that national voice and some clear guidance and kind of governance around what's best in Australia's interests and what's best in the industry's interests as well.
So that whole issue of trust around building in a cooperative has to be replicated again all over when building a value chain, and that's going from production all the way through to the final consumer. And the process is starting at the consumer, working backwards, identifying what those attributes are and delivering against them, finding which attributes have got the most value. So this sphere, this digitisation, builds not only horizontally but builds vertically. And without exploiting that, without driving two halves of the profit function, one is total factor productivity, the other half is terms of trade. So we've got to nail both, because coming down at us are cost competitive producers coming elsewhere out of the world with much better natural factor endowment. So if we don't have it over them organisationally, then we will get hammered. The opportunity is tremendous, but that whole value chain formation, which we've seen in other industries, in manufacturing, in controlled environments. Why are we so far behind? Well, it's biological production, and it's in a variable production area, and Australia is very variable. So you put all those things in together, and we haven't had the infrastructure. So as we get all this together, then the opportunity is to be able to do exactly that. But that value chain formation is going to be critical for us.
So do you think the data will add value on a competitive scale in our economic performance globally?
Yeah, but things like blockchain, making things transparent, making sure that the consumer, when they scan it, goes all the way back and can see everything. So all the claims that are made are validated all the way through. That's where that value is going to be.
Okay, we have time for one more question, quick question.
Sorry,
Yes.
Corinne, I'll just make a comment. I think I guess over the last 150 years, government's been very good at regulating farm production. The fundamental shift that's going to happen in the next 10 years is the consumer will regulate on-farm production. What digital, I guess digitising the supply chain does is whoever's generating the risk in that supply chain, then the penalty moves to them. So if you're putting, let's say, Roundup on as a knockdown to desiccate crop and it exceeds the MRLs or the withholding periods, and it comes into the system, then that liability sits with you. You go, okay, well that's not a good thing. But if the grower's got the evidence to say that they didn't contribute to that in the supply chain and it happened somewhere along, further up, then that liability sits with them. The other advantage is that in grain broadacre, we're in a commodity business. And if we want to move into the product business and get higher values and reposition that, then we have to provide the evidence that we've got all the things that we're claiming to have in place. So from product identity and all of the sustainability and on-farm practices right the way through. Now, CBH led the way in developing the Farm IQ program. That was expensive for growers because they had to do it manually. When you put it into a digital format though, it all sits behind the day-to-day decisions. So as you drive a boom spray into a paddock and you say you're about to take on a new operation, it will immediately put up an alert to say that the withholding period from the previous chemical or practice is there. So the fail-safes come up. That's the space we're trying to move to. So I think when you're looking at this digital concept is around the entire supply chain and repositioning from a commodity to a product going forward.
Okay, Fiona, would you like to ask?
Yeah, well, my question was taking a step back from the market side, but Chris talked about how farmers see the value in using decision tools, and that decision tools are a useful thing. All of the grower groups here will have a look at some of them as part of Be Connected. Most of those decision tools, say in broadacre, have been built using data from small-scale field experiments done by scientists, right? So the way I think about it is that every time a farmer puts a crop in the ground and puts some nitrogen on and calculates the yield at the end of that, even if it's just at a paddock mean level, that's useful information that could be used to build a better nitrogen model, right? So to me, I'm thinking about the value of farm data being put into cooperatives and built up to build better models that can then be used to manage things on the farm better. And I was just wondering what people thought about that.
Mark, you better answer that one.
Want a job? That's very much what the on-farm experimentation, which I didn't do justice today due to time, and also Simon would have done a better job. But it really is trying to have a farm-scale approach and to collect that business model yet to be defined in a way which other farmers can benefit from without getting an unfair commercial advantage from, which should therefore lift the performance of all.
No, it's definitely there.
All right, we do have time for one more question. Yes.
I'm not from an agricultural background, but this data access, control, availability is a huge problem for any kind of way forward for the team. But so what are the real or perceived issues about, say, a paddock's fertiliser data and the associated yield and the rainfall data and the soil data escaping into the public domain? Is this something that can be used against them by a buyer who can say, hey, look how much money you're making, so I'm going to pay you less next time? Or, I mean, what are the actual issues? Because sometimes by addressing the actual problem might actually filter down to some of the decisions that get made along the way. So can they be indemnified against these kind of losses? I was just wondering how this could be managed a bit better.
I'll give the agricultural response. I think there's more technical answers available, but in the end, the history of agriculture is the many versus the few, I suppose. In general, the few have far more power, and generally they may use that power to get their capture of the value chain. And I suppose the farmers, probably the starting point is really haven't really seen a benevolent company sharing that value in a way that the farmer's comfortable with. So they're coming from a fairly sceptical point of view. So as they've increased production, the costs, as I say, the margins haven't necessarily increased, so the profitability of the farm per hectare has only, as I say, that in terms of trade and everything, it means it's always tended to mean, doesn't matter if they increase the production, they're still getting about the same returns, or if they're increasing their returns, their risk is increasing exponentially in return. So they're probably coming from a sceptical point of view. Now the more educated response.
So what rate of return do I need to ensure that you have so I keep you in business and not a penny more? And the supermarkets already do that to processors and to large suppliers coming in. They know your cost of production, and they don't know that, they got you nailed because they've got market power.
There's so many stories from having conversations with producers ranging from, higher rates of finance if you don't have a GPS kind of tractor on your property, and the banks and insurance companies know that. I had one farmer who said that they were applying for finance to do something on their farm, and they had to provide 5 years of data to the bank. And when they left the bank said, "Oh, by the way, would you like the other 15 years of data that we've got about your farm?" Would that make you uncomfortable? I think so. So there's lots of instances where information has been used, and the chicken meat processing is being used against farmers, and it is the farmers who've willingly given their data or unwillingly given their data, but at the end of the day, it's being used against them. So I think that's a genuine fear.
I think the financial instruments are going to drive a lot of the change. Already is happening. And I guess the question, if I'm Bankwest or NAB, proud members of the Food Agility CRC, it is who might my competitor be in the future? Does Monsanto have plans to actually offer finance as well as seed as well as...
I want to go back to the comment that Chris made earlier on around leadership. And I think he made a comment around in giving up control, you get a better outcome. So you can have a good dose of paranoia, and that might be healthy, but equally, we've still got to move forward. So at times we're going to have to be vulnerable and brave and still move forward in the space, and there'll be some setbacks on the way forward. But unless you do that, we are going to be well and truly behind our competitors on the way through. So, yep, go in with eyes open, absolutely, and try and protect ourselves as much as possible, but not to a point where it constrains the rate of progress.
Okay, thank you so much for that. That was a really nice way to sum it up, Peter. So I'd just like to thank you for participating in the session today. The speakers will be here over lunch, so you can drill them more. And Darren's going to come up and say a few words just before we finish. But I want to thank you for participating. I hope you've learnt a lot through this session, which I'm sure you have. I know I have. And my interest has been sparked, yes, in this area. And I'm going to be looking up some of the links that you had for more information, because it's a very interesting space. And I just wanted to make a few comments. One is that the purpose of this was to give you some information that you may not know, or to raise some ideas or discussions. The other purpose is that if there's something that you want to know more about, or you want to discuss, or whatever, for the future projects or future area in this, this is an opportunity for you to give that feedback. So there's there's a, what do you call this? A survey on your table. And if you could just, before you leave, just have a go at filling this out, that would be really helpful for the team and really useful for knowing what they need to do as the next steps in the project from your perspective. And lunch is going to be served out in the lounge. We have, so this is it for most of you, but there's a few people that are coming back, but a lot of the grower groups who are running projects through the eConnected project will be meeting back in here at 1 o'clock. And I think that's all I needed to say. So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand over to Darren. Oh.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you once again for making the time to come through and join us here today. Firstly, to the speakers, thank you very much for giving up your day and time, and particularly Chris and Leanne for hopping on planes and flying over. I know it's a big ask out of the busy schedule, so thank you very much, appreciate it. Finally, from my side, as project manager, just once again want to thank you for, as yourselves, also investing the time to come join us here today. And we wish you safe travels over the Christmas and New Year period. Thank you.